Welcome to our strategic planning video series. I'm Kat, Chief Marketing Accelerator at Lumen. And at Lumen, we build leaders and teams while training in continuous innovation. Now, over the past couple of months, we have been offering our viewers tools for creating strategic plans in 2021 so that you can build thriving businesses amidst this crazy world that we're living in right now. And we have a playbook that you guys can download for free, which can be found on our website at lumen.io, luman.io/strategic-planning. But today, I'm so excited to interview our special guest. We're going to be talking about leveraging uncertainty and building commitment on your team. And we want to contemplate deeper into what kind of commitment leaders and teams need to ensure that they have a strategic plan that stands the test of time and change and crises and nuts. So today we're going to be interviewing Jessica Sharp, who is an expert in crisis management. And over a decade, Jessica has been working with Fortune 500 companies and their CEOs on how to prevent crisis, but also how to manage it when it comes up. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me, Kat. It's such a pleasure to be here, not only to talk about this subject, which I am so passionate about, but also to have the opportunity to discuss the subject with you, somebody who I know so personally and well, and who has exemplified to me what grace in leadership and grace in conflict to receive really feels like. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And on that note, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done in the past before we get started with our questions?
Yes, it's really helpful to have someone explain to them why it's worthwhile listening to what they have to say on a topic. So I'll share a little bit about my background. I originally studied journalism at Boston University, and after I graduated, I went to work at the Boston Globe, and I actually worked on multimedia there, but I decided to move back to my hometown, Utah, where I was from, and I got a job as an assistant, and I was very lucky that the woman who I was assistant to started her own consulting firm. She was a crisis expert, global crisis expert from the Bay Area, actually, and I started working with her and spent the next decade of my career, as you said, working on crisis management. So a little bit about what I was able to accomplish during that time. I overhauled the disaster program at University of Utah Hospital, including the build out of 2 data centers and about 100 different business units working together to look at people and processes and plans and technology in order to make sure that it was resilient according to anything that could happen to the company. I've also worked with United Airlines, building out multiple data centers, as well as doing crisis plans. Office Max, another company that I worked with, had the pleasure of working with incredible people over there who are all former military. So have had a great opportunity to work with former military people. And then I also helped train all the trainers that train on crisis management at BlackRock Financial. So over 300 executives globally, I trained the trainers who then trained them on how they would handle different crises, both hyper-localized as well as global. And now, I used to be very proud of this, but now everybody's gone through a crisis. We're all still in a crisis. There's no more, we're not in the out of crisis, in crisis binary anymore. It's kind of just like chaos. Yeah. So I feel like at this point in time, everyone to a degree is their own crisis expert. So, it's sort of a strange conversation to have now of like being in crisis, not being in crisis, and what it takes to help move through it, because it's kind of all mashed together now as a byproduct of that. But a little bit about, most recently I was at Salesforce. So I actually used that career to go into Salesforce, and I was at Salesforce for a year, where then I built technology that replaced my job. And I really wanted to use the opportunity at Salesforce to learn from the best leaders there. And Salesforce has incredible leaders. I was able to get mentored by Mark Benioff's direct reports. I ran crises there, where I had meetings with Parker Harris over issues, regularly. And so I was really able to tap into this really deep well of incredible leadership at Salesforce, first on the crisis side, and then I actually moved over into sales because I wanted to follow where I was seeing exceptional leadership. And in sales at Salesforce is where I found that. And so I've now spent the last few years really trying to apply what I have learned from my years in crisis, as well as my years at Salesforce, which is not just about crisis, but it's actually about good leadership. because what I really learned in that work is that good leadership can be okay during good times. But mediocre leadership is really bad during difficult times, and great leadership is really great during good times, and it's even better during crises. And I really wanted to understand from the executives that I saw what made them so effective, not only during incidents, but also that, many of the executives that I worked with, they would move from company to company, and they would have a whole flock of people who would go with them from company to company, because folks were so entrusted in them, in their career and in their livelihoods, and they wanted to stick with them through whatever company or whatever mission that it was. So I really wanted to understand, what that was and how can I build that for myself in my life.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I want to piggyback on something you said a few moments ago, which is, everyone has learned how to deal with crisis, and we're all still learning. And so I want to encourage the viewers who are watching today to, put in the chat or send us a message about, some strategies that you have found to, stay adaptable and flexible, and and mourn that this has been hard, that what we've been going through over the past 9 months has been so challenging. And so we are going to be talking about that today. We're going to be giving some tips and tools. But, we're just two people, Jess and I are just two people talking about what we've learned. And I'd love to leverage the wisdom of our community to really hear about how other people are dealing with crises and inspiring commitment on their teams. So with that, I want to leverage your wisdom, Jessica, today. First question is, I'm really curious about, in all of your work, what skills do you think are timeless, that can go through any sort of crises, that leaders need to keep their businesses running and successful in any sorts of times? What kind of skills can leaders start to hone now?
I think the one thing that I see really effective leaders do very consistently is to manage perspective, and specifically their own perspective. So, unplanned business interruption, as we call it in the business, can be anything. It can be somebody's going through, your star player is going through a divorce. It could be a power outage. It could be a global pandemic. It could be, the internet isn't working for your other top player, and they have to deal with their kids at home, school at home. There's so many reasons. There's 5 million ways why and how your plan or what you need to get accomplished doesn't get done. And so really, it's about how can that person really, in a moment of tension, really in a moment of frustration, both hold on to the zoomed out experience of what's important here and what do we need to accomplish, both financially, but also emotionally and present. There's this, I love this saying, people believe we're rational beings with feelings, but we're feeling beings that rationalize our feelings.
Love that.
And I see that really great leaders are able to both zoom out to the grand perspective of things, but also zoom in really microscopically to, what exactly is the reality of the information in the present moment? How does it impact the different things? And how can I move forward from a place of neutrality as well as integrity? The thing about, unplanned business interruptions, or when things don't go as you want them to go, is that for most people in their company, half of their time goes to doing their job really well, and half of their time goes to looking good. And so, and if that is sort of comes at odds with, maybe for some people that experience can come at odds, and that's when we sort of experience politics and bickering and that kind of thing. And when we're in a situation where there's a lot of unknown and there's high possibility or potentiality for mistakes or decisions that have potential bad long-term repercussions, the tax on moving in that space is very high. And so you really need to make sure that you have a lot of trust, that you've already built trust, and that you're then using the opportunity to build trust, understanding the different perspectives and lenses. So how am I both zoomed out? How am I zoomed in? How am I holding true to the reality of the situation, right? The facts of the situation. But then how am I also holding the emotional impact that this is having on my stakeholders and on my team. And the very effective leaders that I know, they do this, and they do this all the time. They're doing this whether it's calm and it's a beautiful sunny day, or they're doing this whether everything's on fire and the building has exploded.
Yeah.
So I would say that's definitely what I see.
Yeah.
The other thing that I see that's very effective for leaders is they have a very strong and clear towards. And again, this is all the time, right? It's so easy for us to get caught up in realizing what we don't want or what's not working, or to get caught up on these things that can they feel like you're in this cycle of like, you keep on doing it and it keeps on getting messed up. And really, how do you pull yourself out of that, emotional wheel of frustration? And how do you say, okay, we have this issue, we can resolve it. Let's put our perspective on and what we're trying to move towards. So something that I always say in my life is like, what is your towards? Okay, I'm glad to hear that isn't working. And what is your towards now? It's like, yeah. we see that this is a problem. Now we want to figure out, how do we put that in perspective of our ultimate highest goal?
Yeah. At Lumen, we call that our North Star, or also our purpose. So when we do work with teams and leaders, we start with that. We don't start with what our metrics going to be and where are we headed and how much money do we want to make. No, because that will come. We're a business, that's going to happen. We actually start with what you're calling the towards. Where are we headed and why? Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the purpose? Who are we affecting? What kind of impact do we want to make? And then to your point about, we are emotional beings, we help teams establish an emotional connection to that vision, to that bigger vision. Because if we're, rooted in excitement and we are, people want to be doing work that they feel has a sense of purpose. And when you have an emotional connection to the impact that you're making, the legacy, we're humans, we all want to have a legacy. When you have an emotional connection to that, then you're motivated, right? Your levels of motivation and drive go through the roof. So, I definitely am in agreement with you about, connecting to a larger perspective, a larger vision, and helping your team see that. And so that's really great for leaders to remember, right? They can lead their teams through that purpose and that vision. But how do leaders inspire commitment on their teams? How do leaders, what have you seen from the leaders that you've worked with? What are they doing to inspire commitment on strategic business plans, but also staying adaptable and flexible, knowing that everything is going to change in a moment's notice?
Thanks for asking that question. And my answer to that actually comes less from my crisis. Oh, I'm going to move out of the sun here. Less out of my crisis experience and more out of my sales experience at Salesforce. So at Salesforce, it was extremely important for teams to do team outings. It was a requirement. Birthdays were celebrated, major milestones were always celebrated. And then we had to have a quarterly celebrations and monthly celebrations. And I realized that was actually really important. It was actually the glue. It's spending time together and being so almost like bored together, but not really, like where you just have time to be sitting in stillness together. I think that's really important because as a leader, you actually need to really understand what motivates your people at a deep level, not just financially, but also personally, and what is going on in their life. But you can't ask them. You can't be like, okay, hey, Martha, how's it going? So your child went to college and you're like a mess about it? Like, it's so inappropriate, right? Oh, I heard you're going through a divorce. That sounds horrible. Let's talk about it. No, don't do that, but you actually need to know these things. You need to know what it is that these people are going through. And people need to feel like you care. And this is actually a big intergenerational gap expectation that we are seeing heavily shown a light on by COVID, which is that people need to feel like you care about them as a human being, as an individual person. And so that means tuning into and understanding their emotional state and how are you not placating, but accommodating the space for everybody's individual and emotional experiences while you yourself don't get wrapped up in the emotion of the experience. And I think that has to come in these small moments, you know, of when you are together. It's when you're walking to lunch and the person, you know, says, "Oh, I'm feeling so frustrated. This is the second time my son is in detention." You know, and then you ask about it. "Oh, you know, interesting. Is this something that's happening?" You have to give space, gentle space, to let people share and encourage them to share what's happening with them personally, so that you can understand that, because that is impacting the way that they are showing up for work, and it is going to impact the way that they show up in a crisis as well. And if you take the time to really understand that person and what makes them tick, and they feel trusted by you, they feel trusted that you're going to be straightforward with them, that you're going to be trustworthy, that you're going to be in integrity, you're not going to throw them under the bus, you know, all these things, that you're going to help them when they're not in the room, they will stick with you through thick and thin. You know, if the money is there, which is actually not that big of a requirement for most people, like, they will go with you wherever it is you go. They'll work on whatever projects it is, because they feel like you really care about them as a person, and you're going to make sure that not only is their financial well-being taken care of, but their emotional, their whole being is taken into account and being taken care of. And this is the biggest change for me, I think, when we think of the division, or not the division, but sort of the migration into an intellectual class of workers, right? Moving sort of, right now we see this major division of, and I want to say that some of this crisis stuff and leadership stuff feels applicable depending on the type of team you're managing. So if you're managing cashiers at a grocery store, that's probably a different conversation than if you're managing a group of engineers at Google. You know, the expectation around emotional depth and personal care and responsibility are different, and there should be a level of appropriateness there as well. But I think what we're generally talking about is people who are probably at a, you know, in a thinking capacity in their job, and they're also surrounded by other people who are using, you know, thinking capacity within their job as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And you know, I think what I'm hearing you say is that when everything blows up and everything is just, you know, out of sorts and uncertain and volatile, what are we leaning into? What's our stability, right? And it's each other. Ultimately, it's each other. We need to know that we can trust our leaders, that they have our backs, that they care about what's going on in our worlds beyond just at work, because let's face it, there's no separation. You can't actually leave your home at the door and your work at the door, right? Another sense of stability that I think teams need is the stability of processes, right? Knowing who's doing what by when, right? So when you're building your strategic plan, you need to have the interpersonal skills, the trust, the empathy, the care, and also the processes, right? Knowing where you're going and what, you know, like, it's basically being held accountable, right? Who can I talk to about what just, you know, any sort of broken agreements that are happening, right? And if I know who was responsible for what, then we can have those clearing dialogues and we can have those caring, you know, empathy sessions with one another about, okay, something's broken, let's fix it together, let's do it together.
Absolutely. You have to start from the beginning with a clear set of agreements and expectations. If you don't have that, you have two parties that are entering into completely different agreements, and that will fall apart. So you have to start with, are we agreeing to the same expectations and agreements? While also recognizing that we are two different people with two totally different life experiences. And one word means something very specific to me, and it means something totally different to you. And so we can even agree to the same words, but at some point, we're not going to be able to see eye to eye on something. And so first we need to make sure that we agree what it is that we're moving towards. And then how in that moment, when we don't see eye to eye on something, how can we move through that with grace and ease? Which is really about, you know, crisis management and the practices of crisis management. And I love that I'm talking about this with you, because I went through a personal experience with you, Kat, in a social capacity with a group of friends. an incredible organization called Ideate. That's a Burning Man camp famous for innovation on the Burning Man playa. And I myself brought up some issues and maybe instigated some conflict or added some fuel to an existing simmering fire and I wasn't able, somebody who prided herself on being a crisis expert wasn't able to handle it. And you handled it, Kat, with just the most grace and ease, you and your partner. And it really just to me showed to me that true mediation skills, they can be learned, they are effective, and they are powerful. And if you are able to leverage those in your life, you really can move through extremely difficult situations. So I'd love for you to share, your thoughts on how in crisis, how do you stay in that place of mediation? How do you stay in that place of openness and possibility?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. What's coming to me now is that when you're in it, when you're in the fire, in the midst of the fire, it is really challenging to be the facilitator, to be the mediator, to be the one who's carrying the conversation. And so I think the number one thing that leaders can do when they're in the midst of crises is to ask for help. Ask for help. Find someone you trust. Say, look, I can't quite make, my husband and I often talk about, our businesses together. And because when we're in it, it's hard for us to see clearly all of the perspectives that want to be heard. And so we will rely on one another to really find the wisdom, the wise response that we actually, want to be giving. It's just when we're in our reptilian brains and we're thinking about, wanting to be right and wanting our voice to be heard and, wanting to do the right thing, it's hard to really be able to zoom out and see. So asking for help is one of the biggest things that leaders can do. Find someone you trust to do that.
And that is something that I see, and that is very effective. And so how can you inside of yourself bring out the elements of a mediator, but then also how do you recognize, okay, this is a time when it would actually be helpful to be a mediator or to bring in a mediator. There are mediators that you can hire. There are lots of people you could bring. Having a neutral third party that can come in and help is one of the most brilliant things a leader can do. Many of us fall prey to this idea of hippo, decision making by the hippo, which is the highest paid person in the room. And that's really a bad way to run a company. Usually, like you said, that self-awareness, like I don't know all the answers. I don't know what the right decision is right now. And I have faith that I know what the direction is and that we can do it together. And so now how do I live in that place? And I both articulate that and then as well as pull in the resources and the support that I need to continue to stay aligned with that vision. Because really crises are accelerants. And as we say, Burning Man, a friend of ours used to say, it's contrived hardship to expedite bonding. The truth is that hardships do expedite bonding. Crisis is either going to split you apart or it's going to bring you together. And so how can you approach it not from the place of making it wrong? It's not, I always say, like, I'm going to help you try to prevent issues, but like, let's also talk about the fact that issues are going to happen. So if you can live from this place of they're going to happen and I can handle them with grace and ease and we can come out better on the other end, that's really going to equip you to then recognize when you're in it and it feels hard and you're like, okay, actually it doesn't need to be this hard. It could be easier if I'm willing to apply some beginner's mind, but willing to say, I don't know the answer, but I'm committed to figuring it out together.
Yes.
That's really, really powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're closing up on our time, and I just want to do a quick recap of everything we touched on. I loved talking to you today, Jessica. It's so juicy, and I feel like every time we get together, we just like we accelerate one another's wisdom to come out. So it's been such a pleasure. And so just to recap, when there's crises, the best things you can be doing right now is to plan for them. You can do so by connecting your team to a bigger vision, a bigger version of themselves, so that they can rely on, knowing where they're going. And then another thing you can do is care about your people and start right now to build up trust, to build up empathy, to build up connection, so that you have a sense of stability when everything falls apart. And another thing you can do to have that sense of stability is when you're planning strategically, get super clear on who's doing what and by when. Have that written out so that together you can hold each other in accountability. And when things fall apart, you know who to have a conversation with, not to blame, not to shame, but to be in cahoots together to create the future. And then finally, start to build up your resources now, because things are going to fall apart. It's bound to happen again. It happened once and happened many, many times. So who are your resources? Who are the people you trust that you can go to help you say the words, I don't know what's happening next, and I need your help. So thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you. Really appreciated having this conversation. And I wish everyone the best of luck as they figure out how to weather this storm and how to find more confidence in their ability to move forward in this new world we're building together.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're interested in learning more about our strategic planning playbook, feel free to check it out online and send us an email, shoot us a message. We'd love to hear from you. What sorts of ways are you out there, leaders, planning for the next crises? How are you supporting your teams to stay adaptable, flexible, and committed? Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.